Welcome to Ottawa, the nation's capital. Not far from here, there are celebrations in the headquarters of the Liberal Party. Liberal Party supporters and officials gathering to celebrate an extraordinary political upset in what has been seen as one of the most consequential elections in Canadian history. The Liberal Party is now set to form the next government, that all of the votes are not counted. It's still not clear whether they will be able to form a majority government or will need to work with other parties to form the next government. But the victory is clear. Canadian media have for the last hour been projecting that it will be a Liberal Party victory. So it's an upset for the Conservatives of Pierre Poilievre, which was the closest contestant against the Liberal Party. Only months ago, Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives had a double-digit lead in Canadian polling. But after President Donald Trump returned to the White House in January and started leveling tariffs against Canada, as he's doing against many countries around the world, but also started threatening to try to turn Canada into the 51st state. It led to a change in political fortunes for the Liberal Party. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stepped down and Mark Carney took over. This is the scene live now at Liberal Party headquarters here in the nation's capital. They'll be waiting for the final results to come in. 172 is the magic number for a majority government. You see them waving the banners there. Canada Strong is the slogan of the party, the Liberal Party of Canada. With me here is the Canadian political commentator, journalist, Paul Belge. You've covered many, many elections. How does this one compare?
An extraordinary one, even though during the election period, which is about 5 weeks long, the polls were really quite stable. Liberals in the lead, the Conservatives pretty close behind, the other parties not factors. But crazy things happened just before the campaign began, with the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, quitting suddenly just after the new year. A very quick leadership race in the Liberal Party, which had already been told by the opposition parties that it would be defeated in the House of Commons if it dared to meet the House of Commons. And then a new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, selected overwhelmingly by the Liberal Party, and then calling an election only 9 days later. Mark Carney's a completely untested as a political talent, but a plurality of voters seem to have decided they prefer him to Pierre Poilievre, who is talented, energetic, but kind of abrasive conservative leader. And Poilievre blew what looked like a sure shot at beating the Liberals in this election, because the Liberals pulled this quick change and got Mark Carney to come in as leader in place of Justin Trudeau. So this extraordinary reversal in fortunes for both of the main governing parties, or both of the main political parties. The other parties were reduced to essentially stand-in roles, really, And now the question is, will the Liberals have enough to command a majority in the House of Commons, which in our system provides essentially uncontested authority to implement your platform?
Stay with us now. We're going to go back to the Liberal Party headquarters. Our senior North America correspondent, John Sudworth, is there and can join us to give a sense of the mood there. No, I think John is busy at the headquarters. We just see the back of someone with the Canadian flag. While we wait for John Sudworth to join us, we'll also go to Neda Taufik, who is our correspondent, who is at the Conservative Party headquarters. But let's take a closer look at what is happening in Western Canada. We're going to go to join Jason Marskop, who works for CBC in Calgary, the capital of Alberta, the oil-rich province of Alberta. Jason, welcome to BBC News. How are the numbers looking there?
It's like something we did not expect. Like Paul was saying, just 4 months ago, we would have expected a blue sweep. This is a very, very conservative province. This is the oil-producing province. It has in the past gone either entirely conservative or 1 or 2 or 3 seats going to the other progressive parties. It seems like there are going to be some cracks in the Conservatives' blue wall. I'm in Calgary, the largest city in Alberta, and as of right now, it's still early. The polls have only closed an hour and a half ago, and the Liberals are winning in 2 seats. They have never won more than 2 seats, as this would be their high watermark in the entire history of Alberta, more than 120 years. So this would be quite the reversal of fortune. But this will be a disappointment for a lot of people here in Alberta and a lot of the West. The Conservatives seem like the home base team. I'm in Calgary. That is Pierre Poilievre's, the Conservative leader's hometown. He just came back for a rally on Friday, a few days before the election closed, to talk to people about how important this election was and how good his party would be for the oil patch. Justin Trudeau, the former prime minister, the Liberal leader, was deeply unpopular here. There were epithets with his name on them all over Alberta. People were really furious with him. They've softened their opinion of Mark Carney. He seems like people like him a fair bit more, not much more, because the Conservatives are still winning many more seats in the West, but the Liberals seem to be doing well enough here to hold their at least their minority government. We will see if it's a majority government and they have that 4 years of stability.
So 2 seats so far, and of course all the votes, as you say, haven't been counted. How do you explain that, Jason? Is it because of the Trump threat? Because we heard reports, including from the premier of the province, who seemed to want to take a different approach with President Trump than that taken by Mark Carney and, quite frankly, with Pierre Poilievre as well.
And the Conservative Party did not seem to like what Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith said. She was on a right-wing podcast down in the States, on the Breitbart News podcast, talking about how her advice that she's been down to the States a fair bit, trying to be the Trump whisperer, as it were, the MAGA whisperer of Canada, talking to them, urging them, she said, to lay low on tariffs until the next election in hopes that Conservatives would win, because she'd been realizing that and as everybody has, that the Trump 51st state threat has been very good for the Liberals and really turned the fortunes for the Conservatives. She also told those that right-wing audience that she believed that Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, was in sync on a lot of policies with Trump. That did not go over well here. She had been invited to rallies by Danielle Smith, by Pierre Poilievre before, but not during this election. He kept well quiet of her, and she kept quiet herself, as to not cause him any more damage.
While you're with us, Jason, I must ask you about some of the warnings from prominent political leaders in the West, including Preston Manning, saying that if the Liberals do get a fourth term, that Canadian unity, the future of Canada, would be on the agenda. How serious is that warning?
Something to watch over the coming months. And we've had this before in 2019, 6 years ago, when the Liberals won a very narrow minority government, but they were shut out of the western provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan. There was a movement called Wexit, a pun on the Brexit, of course, Western exit. It didn't go very far. There weren't many organized leaders within that movement. This time seems different. The question is, will it be different enough? Polls show that maybe 25 up to as high as 30% of people in Alberta espouse separatist views, that they want to be out of Canada, whether it be as the 51st state joined U.S. or just go on its own as a wealthy oil-producing province. We'll see if there's any energy, and also see what the Premier, Danielle Smith, who has some political ties with some of these people espousing separatist views. And we'll also see, what will be important is whether the Liberals can make gains in Alberta and Saskatchewan. They seem to be picking up at least one seat in Saskatchewan, a smaller province, but let's see what they can do in Alberta, because the more Liberal or non-Conservative seats there are in Alberta, the larger argument that might be that some people really are excited, in fact, by a Carney government.
When do you expect, Jason, will get the full numbers from not just Alberta, but from the western coast, and of course there's British Columbia too to still show its numbers?
They've begun to count in British Columbia. All the polls are closed across Canada. I think they've been closed for an hour now. It will take time. Some of these ridings seem like they're pretty close. And there was a very large advance vote. Could be up to half of votes, some of the party insiders are telling us, could be counted, could have been cast before Election Day, and that's going to take much longer to count. A lot of polling indication that we've seen in the past examples have shown that those numbers skew Liberal. So the Liberals' hopes could be in late at night as they count those advance votes to put them over the critical 172 seat threshold that they are not at yet.
Jason Markusoff from CBC, we'll let you get back to looking at those numbers coming in, but thank you very much for your interesting observations. Reporting from Calgary in Alberta, really a province to watch going forward, with many of the natural resources that fuels this country's economy, and with a very different political perspective on what's happening now and what's to come, with the government now certain to be dominated by the Liberal Party, but just by how much we just don't know. Let's cross to another critical province, which has a very distinct culture and outlook, the province of Quebec. We're joined by Yannick Dumont-Baron from Radio-Canada. Yannick, thank you for joining us. Just give us your sense of what's happening there in terms of the returns.
Well, if you look at the Liberals, they got some of their gains in Quebec, right? They had maybe 9, 10 seats. They gained those from Bloc Québécois, a party that mainly is there to promote sovereignty and independence of Quebec. So it's an interesting dynamic here for that, for sure. But if you look at the number of votes, the percentage, there you see that the gains, the Bloc Québécois is still there, it still has some support, but it's the NDP that seems to be totally collapsing in Quebec. I've seen numbers like 3% of votes. It's very, very low. So they've lost people there as well. Bloc Québécois is very interesting, Liz, because it's a regional party. It brings candidates only in Quebec. Its main goal 25 years ago in the 90s when it was created was independence, help independence, be there in the capital of the country to make sure that Quebec could leave that country. But since then, independence has not really been on the agenda as much since that referendum in 1995. So that party is still there. They represent issues. They bring specific issues to Ottawa that are specific to Quebec. But some people have said, we're going to vote with our head this time and not with our heart, meaning that there's an emergency here. There's this threat from the South, from Donald Trump, economic threat. When Donald Trump enforces policies with migrants, some of those migrants shows up at our border, at Quebec's border. So they've seen, I think, what I've heard and what people who normally would vote Bloc told me is that this time around, there's an emergency, there's a threat. It's Donald Trump, and that's why they would change. It's sort of a strategic voting, if you wish.
Let's get a bit more detail from you on this, as you say, this emergency. You mentioned the border, that there has been, not just since President Trump came to power, but even before then, many of the immigrant communities who've crossed into the United States coming into Canada across what, of course, is what is the longest undefended border in the world. Tell us about how that has played in Quebec.
Well, it's also interesting because it ties back to Donald Trump in his first mandate. At that time, then in 2017, 2018, he removed some protection for people from Haiti, among others, who were living in New York, in Florida, and their idea, their reflex was then to go to up north in New York State, where they would cross between two border crossings. And it became a big wave, sort of an illegal and irregular wave coming into Canada. This flooded the province, all those organizations that are normally there to help migrants and newcomers, they were flooded by this. So it became, in Canada and in Quebec, some sort of an issue in the political football there. So that's one thing that really affected Quebec. Canada as a whole, and that ties to who was the prime minister in Canada before, welcomed a lot of migrants, a lot of them temporarily, like students and workers who would come and work for a few years and maybe decide to stay afterwards. So two waves of migrants, right? Those seeking asylum and then those coming here to work and live. That has changed the landscape. I think that contributed to why Justin Trudeau and the Liberals were not really popular in Quebec and in Canada 6 months ago. Then Donald Trump got elected, Justin Trudeau resigned, Mark Carney came around, and all those big fortunes for Pierre Poilievre just disappeared.
And it's been interesting in the election how much attention has been paid, and of course this has to be the case in Canada with 2 official languages, is just how well Mark Carney spoke French. And it was often said that people in Quebec, where language is a very hot political issue, were willing to overlook Prime Minister Carney. He does speak French, but of course not as fluently as some of his political rivals.
Yes, but that's interesting because I think that the assumption of many people was that his French was worse than it is actually. So when they would hear it, they would hear him and they would say, "Oh, it's not that bad after all." So that's one thing. But I think that the main thing is that I will give you an example of what I've heard recently. Is someone was saying in your house, if there's a big leak in your roof, in your kitchen, you're not talking about the color of the paint, you're fixing that roof there. So that's the emergency there is Donald Trump. And then if that leader is calm and has experience, it doesn't matter as much as if he doesn't speak French or that well French. Having said that, Mark Carney was also, I think, very smart in the sense that every chance, every opportunity he had, he mentioned Quebec culture. And he said in those negotiations with Donald Trump for commerce, for trade, Quebec distinct culture, French language, that would be off the table. So in a sense, for those people who really care about how distinct Quebec is and how French it still is, well, they could find reassurances there.